Namaste, everyone. Vidal here, Maheshananda, to share with you another podcast on my Satsang podcast, where we discuss the core themes of great wisdom traditions that come from India, including yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, and the importance in integrating astrology into our daily lives. Today's satsanga is on sleep and the importance of sleep for healing, for spiritual evolution, and for advancing culture, which is actually one of the titles of a paragraph section in my recent book, The Evolution Revolution. So it is a continuation of the satsang I recently did called Designing a Mind for Success, where I discuss the four aspects of the mind according to the Raja Yoga tradition and the different levels of the mind and how important attention is in our daily life and for attaining success. And attention has much to do with how we sleep. It influences our quality of sleep. It influences our quality of attention, our power to be attentive, focused, concentrated. And a lot of people may not understand how sleep can be used to change the way that we operate and the way that we live in the world on a conscious level. Why is sleep so important? I want to answer that question. First and foremost, because sleep is the domain where we go into our subconscious. We go into this realm where we house our subtle desires and these sentiments that have yet to be expressed, and they are sort of being jumbled around in the dream state through different experiences. And dream exploration or deciphering our dreams can be a way to understand this conscious mind and the things that we are manifesting or attracting. Some use the term the power or the law of attraction and why these things are happening. So looking into our dreams is a common approach that's used much more in Western or Jungian psychology, that the dream in a way represents are like metaphors and have sort of deeper mystical meanings, aren't literal in a sense. But dream to the yogic perspective or the Vedantic viewpoint is not very relevant. Dream is basically suppressed or compressed conditionings of the mind. These are conditions of many experiences, and imagine the thousands of experiences, choices, and impressions that the mind has taken on over many, many incarnations. Again, and this is a point that I pointed out in the Satsanga podcast titled Designing a Mind for Success. We have to always keep in mind that we're not looking at just a mind and a brain that represents this one life. We carry a culmination of many, many lives, thousands and thousands, potentially, even Yoganandaji says, 1,000,000 births. And so that history, that storage bank is vast, is complex. And so trying to understand why we do things or trying to find the source of where those things are coming from doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because it may go back to 1,000 lives before this one, and you repeated it over and over and over again. That's not what's important. It's to create a sense of what is real and create a sense for what is not real. What is real? We, at the very essence of our existence, are pure consciousness. We are the light of eternal consciousness. We have no beginning and no end. And everything that we're carrying around is a collection of many, many experiences, many, many thoughts, and many, many emotions, and all of these things that add up to the complexities of the human mind. It is complex, but yet the mind is so powerful. And sleep is a place where we can unravel, undo these conditions, these impressions, or these seed tendencies that I talked about, samskaras, which are a big part of yogic work. And I mentioned this idea of sleep being the secret sadhana. Because we look at sadhana, this term sadhana defines our spiritual practices in the conscious world. Meditation, repetition of mantra, japa, doing karma yoga, cultivating devotion, and study, increasing our knowledge. All of these things are important. This is what we could define as the integral yogic path. This is the fourfold path: karma, bhakti, jnana yoga, and raja yoga, which I express and define in my book, The Evolution Revolution, as listen, learn, love, and let go, or surrender. And that integral yoga is a way of integrating these yogic techniques, not just as practical exercises or mechanical exercises, but as an integrative approach or attitude that we carry in our day-to-day life. Integral yoga, in the higher sense, is cultivating the right attitude, right? So now we look at sleep, and we look at this secret or the hidden sadhana that we can do as a passive approach. Well, the integral yoga as a practical approach in day-to-day life is more an active effort. Our sleep healing can be considered a type of inner or more passive approach because it's a way of going into sleep. It's a way of guiding ourselves into sleeping. And it's a way of clearing the mind, cleansing the mind, focusing the mind as we enter into sleep. And then again, as the mind starts to reawaken from the subconscious or the unconscious, and as it enters back in, it is a process of purifying again. And those points, the entry and the exit, are like entering a stage and exiting a stage. When we come in and out every day of our human life, we enter the stage of life. We enter this domain, this realm of time and space. And think of it like a stage. Think of it like a play, a drama that's taking place. When you come in back to the conscious world, you enter this stage, you have an identity, you carry a name, you have a role that you're playing. But then as you exit the stage and you go back into your sleep, you forget all of that. You have no name. You have no form. You don't identify with a body anymore. Names and forms are completely abolished. And we do this back and forth. And this is the secret place. And the way that we advance not only our own individual spiritual path towards enlightenment, but we can advance our culture. And I speak about this actually in a section in my book called The Role of Sleep in Advancing Culture. And why I think this is so important is because most people today don't know how to sleep. Meaning that the quality of sleep is tarnished with many aspects of a lifestyle that don't support good sleep. We intoxicate, we impress the mind, we are hyper-stimulated today, especially those living in urban environments. The rate at which our brain is firing neurons, it's like firecrackers popping off, exploding in the brain. And this firing of these neurons is happening at a rate faster and faster than ever before. And this has been documented, this has been studied in many of the recent research studies that have gone on using fMRI scans that show this in the brain. And so, again, this process of improving our sleep and deepening our sleep begins with slowing the mind down. And this is where our lifestyle becomes the fundamental or the first step in this process to improving our sleep and enhancing our spiritual life. We have to begin to live a life that is mindful, that increases awareness of why we do things, of slowing down, for example, when we eat, taking time to eat in a quiet space, taking time to maybe say a prayer by recognizing that food is divine. Food has intelligence, especially organic foods or healthier foods. And practicing yoga, walking more, disconnecting from social media or our digital devices, and taking time to do things that are part of living a responsible life. Practical things. How many people wash their car? How many people are taking the time to cook for themselves instead of going out to eat all the time? How many people are washing their own clothes instead of sending their clothes out for fluff and fold or dry cleaning? And bringing ourselves back to these simple practices that allow us to slow down, that allow us to be more mindful. And let me explain, when I use this term mindful, and I'm using it because it's become a sort of a generic term for having compassion, for having more awareness, for being more aware, for taking personal responsibility for what we create in our lives. Mindfulness is an opportunity, is a practice of what one of my main counselors, Bhaktananda Ji, called practicing the presence of God. What does that mean? Well, he told me this story that he once was at Mother Center at the headquarters where his guru lived, Yogananda. It's the top of a mountain there in Los Angeles. And he, at the time, was doing some gardening exercises or some gardening work or something there on the grounds. And Yogananda Ji was coming in or approached him as he was doing that and reminded him that it's not what you do, but it's how you do it. And he said, whatever it is you're doing, keep that connection. Keep that presence connected to God. That whatever it is you're doing, you're becoming an instrument for the divine. You're doing this perhaps to help and serve your guru as a service for our global community. And basically carrying this idea that what is inside of us is inside of everyone. When we say Namaste, we're recognizing that what is within us, what sustains us, is the same force, is the same life force that sustains every living thing. And we simply become an instrument of service for the divine. We're not doing anything for ourselves. That would be a very selfish and limited understanding. We're doing things to serve humanity. And when we carry that attitude, we are guided, we are trusting, we are having faith that the divine is guiding us in the best direction, in the highest direction, to bring us to that place. So practice the presence in your day-to-day life. Do things with a connection to the divine, that you are merely an instrument, that this mind and body is a vehicle, is a part of a vehicle that is carrying and housing pure consciousness, your soul. And connect, cultivate a link, a source, a channel with someone, an image, a guru, that you feel is somewhat like a key, a connector, a cord that connects you, is like a link to that pure and expansive eternal consciousness. And sometimes having that visual and carrying that visual in your third eye, maybe having that visual in your hand or in your pocket or in your purse, is important, because you look at it and go, there it is. I am one. I am filled with love. And it allows us to use affirmations, mantras, to keep that connection. So mindfulness is important. Practice the presence to keep that connection in whatever you do. Because this link to that cultivates what we call in Ayurveda ojas. What is ojas? Well, ojas is often termed as the life sap. And what you do is you begin to realize that what is sustaining your body is this nectar that comes from that pure source. And as you slow the mind down, as you become more mindful, more aware, more focused, more present, that ojas, which is immunity on the systemic level within the body, we begin to allow and feel sustenance that is coming from that divine source. It is not merely more vitamin C. It is not merely more organic food that is giving you immunity. That's part of it. But most of it depends on the quality of the mind-body relationship and its capacity to allow that consciousness in. And so this is an important part of preparing for sleep. So I'm laying the framework here, or the groundwork, for all of these 8 to 10, 12 hours that you spend in your conscious state, doing and thinking and connecting and talking and eating, all of those things to prepare you for the subtle details that we'll get into in those moments before sleep. So this mental activity is directed and borrowed from our immune system. And it helps us to gain mental power, mental acuity. A person cannot have quality of mind, focus of mind, if the mind is disturbed. We talked about kshipta and vikshipta, the distracted mind, the partially distracted or unfocused mind. And I see this constantly, all the time. We would reduce so much expense in our life, so many problems, and so much burden to companies if their employees, or if we reduced these distractions from our mind. Because when the mind is distracted, we increase our capacity for human error. Why? Because we make decisions from an emotional state, from a condition. And it leads us down a path that is overgrown, filled with branches and issues, and it makes it hard to enjoy the path. This is again why we have to cultivate a more focused mind. When the subconscious mind displays its mind movies, such as activity, as seen through dreams. Often a person arises with a feeling of lethargy or feels a sense of disorientation when they're arising, when they're getting up after sleep. So, in order to live an evolutionary life, the subconscious mind needs to be nourished with positive dialogue. And this is a positive dialogue that does not engage in gossip, or that needs to be interacting with groups and places that are impressed with negative vibrations. We have to be more selective about where we go and who we go with, because your environment is your greatest influence. I see it, and it's just simply natural law. When we're in a negative environment, when we're around a certain number of people or work in a certain environment, and think about how many hours you may be doing that in your day, in your month, and in the years of your life. That's what shapes your life. That's what we become. So we have to place importance. You can do all the exercises you want. You can do a lot of what people are talking about, yoga nidra now. Much of what I'm sharing with you has some correlation to that technique and that practice, but this is deeper. This is different. And this process works to remove samskara, remove vasana, these aspects of these conditions that we're trying to overcome, because these influence our day-to-day life. So if a person cannot easily access such positive places where people are spiritual and optimistic and eating well and healthy, then nature is the place to go. Nature will help you. Mother Prakriti will do the work for you. Nothing is more powerful than the elements of that natural world that are always there for us to go. Most people have a garden they can go to, or a park that they can go to, or maybe a beach or the mountains. Even in New York City, even in Hong Kong, I remember many of the great moments and times I've had in Hong Kong teaching there, and what a massive city. But I often shared with the locals and the students that I was meeting in the classes I was teaching, take me to nature. They said, "Oh, Mas, we can't wait to take you on this hike." We would go on these amazing hikes. And right within, not far, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes from major concrete jungle, I found myself on a coastline, on a small island, in the mountains, walking, and just with views that were just breathtaking. And so we all, hopefully, in wherever we live, have an opportunity to access these places, because nature is here to heal us. And remember what is inside of us, those elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, are here within us and also outside of us. We have to create a synchronicity with that. When the seasons change, feel it, recognize it. What is happening in nature? Because it will help us. It changes. There are subtle changes feelings, sentiments that we have as we shift from fall to winter and winter into spring and summer. Be aware of those shifts, because those are messages, energies that nature is influencing for us to connect with and to stay in harmony with. This is the wisdom of Ayurveda. You can't just eat whatever you want, because you can go to a grocery store and buy it. Most people don't know that groceries do a lot of things to sell you things that aren't available from nature at certain times of the year. They'll freeze things, they'll spray things. I learned this because my father, for some years, was in the agriculture business and fruit and melons and things like that, and vegetables, and I learned of these practices, what these groceries do. So we have to be careful, and this is where farmers markets become very important. And so many people don't understand that what we eat influences our mind and body, influences our psychology and biology, And this is where a plant-based diet begins to take us to a higher level, because food carries intelligence. Meats and animal products carry consciousness and carry certain diseases and energies that influence us. I'm not disregarding the importance of meats as taught by Ayurveda to treat certain diseases and disorders. It's in the text. Makes sense. There's certain proteins and energies and qualities of those foods that help us to make it through certain very chronic diseases. Well, what I'm saying is, if you're not dealing with those diseases and those chronic disorders, and you have good balance of the doshas, of your physiology, mainly your digestion, then look to a plant-based diet. It is the higher diet. It is easier on your metabolism. There's a lightness, literally and figuratively. There is more light in the green things. Why? Because if you've listened to the earlier podcasts, I talk about one of the 4 aspects of the mind. Chitta, meaning the mind. I mentioned buddhi. Buddhi is that intuitive capacity of the mind. Ahamkar, the ego aspect. And manas, the outer function of the mind. So going back to buddhi, what is buddhi? It is the higher mind. It carries intelligence. And that intelligence is correlated to the influence of the planet Mercury. Whether we know it or not, we all seek green in our lives. We're all attracted to green things. What is green? Plants, nature. Why? That color is correlated to a light projected by the planet Mercury that is absorbed in nature, creates a connection, a communication network that humans have with nature. We call it buddhi. It also refers to Prakriti, Mother Nature. This is why yogis and the very evolved rishis and sages always endorsed being in nature, learning in nature. Hence, the many images that we see of sages sitting under trees, because the trees play a very unique role in collecting consciousness, via the leaves, via the process of photosynthesis, where the leaves collect that light of the sun. Sun is the soul. So, and I'll discuss later and in other satsangas where this Mercury is relative to our own life. And this is where the birth chart, the horoscope in each of us plays a role, because Mercury, depending on where it is in our birth chart, it tells us how Mercury works for us or perhaps is not in a supportive place. In some places, some houses, some signs, it has power, strength, does very well. And in others, it's what we refer to as debilitated. And that's why certain people don't communicate well. They suppress things. It has to do, again, with the karmas, the impressions, all of these things that have been played out over many thousands of lives, and they show up here. So these are all secrets. These are all practical things that the great Vedantic traditions have taught us. India was a plant-based culture for thousands of years. I'm not looking at what's happening today in India as a result of empirical rules and conquest over India and invasions by almost everybody on the planet. They changed that layout. But I'm talking about the original culture, the golden age. And this is the teaching that I like to bring forth in this podcast. So we remember those gems of wisdom that exist from this great, great civilization that, in my view, the Western world desperately needs. Capitalism alone, without this spiritual wisdom, will lead us into death and decay. We need the balance. And so it is. This wisdom is here to take us into this higher and higher age. So let's get now, I want to get into those deeper techniques and practices that you can do in sleep to heal and evolve. First of all, we have to do more things, aside from many of the things that I just shared about lifestyle and mindfulness and devotion and concentration, all of these things. I want to mention a couple more things about, because all of those things that I've just discussed are about training the conscious mind, the practical mind that we need and we use in our day-to-day activities. So we talked about our environment. Positive speech. I want to mention how important positive speech is. This includes pure language. Language that is not derogatory, language that is not critical of others or judgmental of others, but language that is also not harsh. Language that uses grammar and terms that are positive, that are supportive. This means affirm positive things in your own life and what you're doing. Look at positive things in others and recognize that by affirming that through positive speech. I really appreciate this quality that you have. Someone invited me recently to do a lecture. It was somewhat last minute, and I agreed, and I recognized the sacred or synchronistic timing of all of this, and I was very appreciative to the divine for this opportunity. And I recently offered a gesture back to that individual, who happens to be now a good friend. We've developed a friendship now over the last few years. And he responds by saying, "That's very kind of you." And I responded by, "It's called reciprocity." He manifested that, and there is this continuous now from the beginning of our friendship of a reciprocal practice that is happening. This is the beauty of divine friendship. Reciprocity. It's an important theme in these teachings. There's a give and take that we must share with all of our human relationships. Grooming the subconscious mind helps the conscious mind. And here are a few things you can do to improve being in a positive state and improving the quality of our day-to-day life. So affirm positive thoughts, disregard and negate negative thoughts. Don't give the negative thoughts attention by repeating them or talking about them. And that includes watching negative things or looking at media that is negative or angry or violent. So clear them. But it is important to affirm positive thoughts right before sleep by commanding your mind to awaken at a certain time. So as you're laying down your bed and you're going to sleep, affirm, "I will wake up at 7 a.m., at 6 a.m. Ideally, what I would recommend is that you affirm to yourself to wake up at sunrise. Check it, see what time it is wherever you're living. And then as you're going to sleep, affirm, "I will wake up. I will arise at this time." And do that repetitively until you begin to manifest that and you awaken at that time that you chose. This is a way to empower and begin to groom. It's like a way of combing the subconscious mind, like getting the knots out and getting those curls and bring those waves back in your hair. I haven't had nice curly, long, wavy hair for some time, so I'm forgetting what it's like, but I do appreciate beautiful hair. So grooming the subconscious mind by choosing specific times to arise. You need to do this repetitively and do it until it begins to occur. Doing it once in a while or, a couple of times a week is not going to be an effective way to do that. You need to do this consistently every day. Could be weeks, could be even months, to begin to create this power and this capacity. Schedule certain tasks upon rising, like making your first thought be on God. So when you wake up, prepare to think about God. So tell yourself that. When I arise, my first thought will be of God, of Guru, of whatever image you have. And you should be clear with what that is, your Ishta. Have maybe the image by your bed, so that perhaps as you arise, or maybe in front of your bed, so that you have that image there, welcoming you into the conscious world. This is important to, again, groom easily. Now, I'm using the term groom because these are gentle ways. And these are more broad ways to begin to create that power of the subconscious mind so that it works for you. And we're not just a bunch of robots following conditions and recordings of so many old habits and lives. Avoid making excuses. Another important way of taking responsibility. Say, I'm going to do it. I can do it. It's going to happen. And create those reminders each day. Set aside time. Create that space and that environment so that you can focus, so that you can really dedicate that power of attention. Because as we know, the quality of our life is really determined by the power of our attention. So learn from it. And learn from these experiences, because these experiences can help you to change and to grow in this evolutionary direction. Another practical exercise for your conscious mind is to practice a technique. One of the great ones of the Raja Yoga Sutras is what is known as Praktipaksha Bhavana. And this, in the general sense, is often referred to as opposite thinking, or recognizing that you can shift the mind from a negative thought or any experience that you're going through and apply 3 practices. This is one way of applying Praktipaksha Bhavana. First, when you have an experience in your life and it's challenging you in some way, or it's an emotion, or maybe it's something that you've seen and is triggering you, or this person is saying something and it just doesn't feel good. Right? So you take that as an energy, right? Recognize that this is an energy and suppress it. And I'm not using the term suppression again in a negative way by saying hide it or push it under the carpet. No, I'm saying take that energy and push it aside, like a master martial artist. This is taught in the great Vedic system known as Dhanurveda. And in this system, they recognize that your opponent has energy. And rather than trying to resist their energy as they're striking you or attacking you in whatever way, you're using their energy as power for yourself. And you're learning to suppress that energy by pushing it aside and using it to your advantage. This is a powerful way to divert energy to a higher place. So this higher movement of the energy, even as negative thoughts or old conditioning and patterning that can trigger emotions, can be used to convert this into powerful energy or forces to overcome adversity, to overcome challenges, and to promote self-transformation. So negative thoughts or emotions are only bad if we dwell and get stuck and trapped in them, entangled. But if we can transform and use these and convert them, or transmute them, I love that term, they can be used for transformation. Very, very, very powerful. So, suppress, substitute, by replacing that energy, thought, emotion, experience, whatever it is, and substitute it with something positive. By looking at something good, by recognizing a positive attribute. It could be within yourself, could be in somebody else, or by putting yourself in a positive environment. Substitute that environment with a good one. Or a positive image. If you've just seen a terrible video that is very violent and they're out there. I mean, there's so much out there. The dark clouds are all over the place. Substitute them by finding the sunlight. You know, I often say, this is especially the case in California, for those that live near coastal regions where there's this kind of marine layer that is very common in the Pacific and even all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, where these marine layers will just gray the coastlines for a better part of half the day or even into the early afternoon. But if you're just a mile, sometimes a couple miles from that coastline, you can look at the coastline and say, it's gray there. But if I just go in a little bit, there's beautiful sunlight. And it changes your mood. It changes your attitude. You're on a warm, hiking, nice walking path and enjoying the sunlight. And it just feels so refreshing and so renewing. And so this can really bring us so much change and so much optimism. So, suppress, substitute, and now the third, sublimation. Take that energy and direct it to a higher place. Take it into meditation. Take that experience, that energy from the emotion, whatever it is again. Take it into doing a good deed. Simple example, I was at the park. I often go to these parks or dog parks with my doggie, Nandi. And I see the behavior that goes on between dog owners and their pets. And it's an interesting study, I have to say. It's a fascinating study to see how each person, the relationship they have with their own dog, it is very interesting. And so I see my dog get into a procreative position with another dog and mounts the other dog, which these pets are doing constantly, male, female, large, small. Some of it is because of their wanting to play a dominant role. Sometimes they'll kind of stand. This little French bulldog does that to my dog, and the dog will just kind of knock him over and stand on top of him and just stand there and look around. I'm on top of you. And so they do these interesting things, and this woman observed my dog doing this to a smaller dog, not her dog, but it was another dog, owner of somebody else. The owner of that dog didn't care, but she had a particular reaction. She was triggered by seeing my dog on top of another dog. And she goes over and gives him a nudge with her foot. It was a bit harsh. I found it to be a bit careless and lacking compassion. So I addressed it and I said, listen, I would appreciate that you would do that in a more gentle fashion. And I noticed that there was some anger. There was some resistance coming from her, and she wasn't comfortable with both me saying something and what the dog was doing. And I realized that she was also deaf. I backed off. I went into moments of reflection, and it allowed me to not begin to try and prove that she's right, that I'm wrong, or vice versa, but to cultivate compassion and to take that energy that she sent out. I had suppressed it, kind of moved it aside. I had substituted it with a new environment by moving into another space. Maybe I created some distance, started to get into conversation with others. And then I used that energy for sublimation. And it allowed me to think and come to a more compassionate space by offering prayer and understanding for her. For whatever reason, she had that view. And that, when dogs do that, it triggered her in that way. And so I offered prayer for her, and I offered compassion and understanding, not directly towards her, but in my meditations. And in that way, I had hope and had a feeling of, I learned from this experience. I have grown from this experience because it took that lower energy that often dwells in the lower chakras without getting into a deeper conversation, and I moved it into a heart space. So again, suppression, substitution, sublimation, the power of Praktipaksha Bhavana, thanks to the great teachings of Patanjali Maharshi in his great text, the Raja Yoga Sutras. So that is something that we can use often, and every day we have so many of these experiences to apply such great teachings. So now some techniques for training the subconscious mind. I just talked about the conscious mind. Now a few techniques for the subconscious mind, because this is where we go when we sleep. First, create a sacred space. Do you have that space in your home? Do you have that space in your bedroom? Does your bed and your bedroom have a feeling of spirituality, a feeling of calmness, some energy that you've created there with pictures, with sound? Maybe, it's important to have silence or a quiet space in that room, because this is where you sleep. So find ways to do that in your room, removing TVs, removing computers and technology, turning off all of these gadgets before you sleep. Practice concentration, especially in those moments, in those 1 to 2 hours before you go to sleep, by reading. Read something that's mindful, that's spiritual. By writing. Those two practices slow the mind down. By meditating, sitting quietly. So these practices help us to cultivate concentration. Another great practice called trataka in the yoga tradition is by lighting a candle and focusing on that candlelight. Seeing the gold and blue hue of that light. And see that light as a symbol of your soul. So many, many things can be done to cultivate concentration before you go to sleep. Now, as you get into those pre-sleep moments, begin to repeat. Now I'm talking about you're now in bed. You're laying down. You're feeling sleepy. You're feeling tired. Begin to repeat a positive affirmation. Could be a poem, could be a verse. I recommend that it be short. Maybe 3, 4, 5 lines. Nothing, words, not lines. Just, I am light. I am peaceful. Right? Simple things like that you can recite. I am the dynamic source of my soul. I will attract positive abundance, positive people, positive environments in my life. And I can also recommend, there are wonderful books actually that Yogananda wrote called Scientific Healing Affirmations, or another book where it is titled Where There Is Light. And these are infused with his divine consciousness. Swami Jyotirmayananda, Shivananda also have wonderful writings where you can extract these poems, Sufi poems, Rumi poems, whatever you have your preferences. And recite these as you lay in bed. You start out loud, repeating those words, and then take them into mental whisper, where you're just whispering them. So you go from out loud, then you go into a light whisper, and then they become mental. You're just repeating them mentally as you go into sleep. And try to do this consistently every night as you go to bed. So it's consistent. It may last for a minute before you fall asleep. It may last for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But it will help if you're doing everything else and you're packaging this whole experience. This is the way to do it. It has to be an integral experience. It has to be a complete package approach. And then go into that deep sleep. I also want to recommend removing mental disturbances. So try not to allow negative thoughts to come in. Stick to the affirmation. Stick to the mantra. Stay on the vehicle. Don't jump off this yet. You're not going to jump off into that deep sleep state. See, what we're trying to do is cross the subconscious and get to the deep sleep, where the mind is free of dream disturbances. So we need to get this purification going, the process has to occur consistently and repetitively for some time so that you can jump deep into that state of pure bliss sleep. So what we're doing in this is regrooving the brain. You're regrooving the way the brain and the neurons in your brain fire so that you can access and enliven especially parts of that brain, like the frontal cortex, that expand into high levels of consciousness. In the realm of time and space and regular deep sleep practices. When we get into deep sleep on a regular basis, and it's a long sleep through the night, usually unbroken for many, many hours, it recharges us, it rebuilds our immunity, and it changes our perspective and our attitude and our living relationship with this world. The world becomes our guru. The world becomes our teacher, Vishwaguru. And then the relationship between sleep, or these subconscious, unconscious domains, and the conscious domains, and the highest conscious domain, Turiya, or that superconscious state, are unbroken. We become fully absorbed. We've become fully grounded, rooted in that which is unchangeable. And it displays in our life as a resilience to this world. Tis and tat, hustle and bustle, none of it disturbs us. We stay rooted in that divine realm that is eternal, that is always with us, like a portable paradise. So I'll leave us now and end this Satsanga podcast on healing through sleep. And I've given you some very simple but practical things that you can begin to do. If you want to learn more about this and read about this, you can find this again in my book, The Evolution, Revolution, Yoga, Ayurveda, and the Rise of the Soft Power Culture. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Remember that you are the light of pure consciousness. You are filled with love, and your true essence is peace. Namaste.